Hello, all of you vaingloriously wonderful people. To say that the Megatech DLC for Astroneer released in rough shape would be an understatement. It was chock full of bugs, many causing crashes or blocking progression, and a lot of the ideas for Megastructures felt sort of half-baked. I'm not going to rehash any of the bugs today, but I do want to talk about the many problems with Megatech and how, in my opinion, those all contribute to one larger overall problem. At the very end, I'll even make a suggestion for how I think this larger problem could be resolved, along with ideas for how to improve each megastructure. This is a long video, so I've included timestamps for chapter markers to let you skip around or come back to a certain chapter later. Let's get started. We begin where the DLC really kicks off, with the construction anchor. I find it odd that its control panel deviates from the design and functionality of all other control panels in the game. You open it up and there are just a couple of buttons with zero information provided on what to do next. While it isn't difficult to figure out how to use these buttons, the lack of a display that could contain some useful information makes this item feel like it is lacking any attention to detail that we have seen previously, since it deviates from how all other control panels in the game work. In my opinion, it should have one big green button under a flip-up cover like all the other control panels we're used to, and it should contain a small display that provides a short description of the megastructure or information on how to deploy the construction anchor. That takes us to the Mega Printer Platform. They work fine for their intended purpose of creating a megastructure, though the animation for the Mega Printer drone is fairly underwhelming. It hovers around in a circle, very slowly printing the megastructure or its additional stages, and the animation sequence feels somewhat incomplete. I know the trailers we saw for Megatech were early versions of the game, but the Mega Printer drone was seen with small thrusters firing. That animation alone would add a bit of detail that the drones are lacking. It would also be nice to see the print heads on the drone have some sort of animation similar to existing printers. This is yet another example of what I feel like is a running theme of a lack of attention to detail. Once you have completed the megastructure and all of its various stages, you're left with a fairly large platform. While these can be great for storage or even used for production modules, they are locked in place. So if you do want to use them for anything once a megastructure is complete, you will have to work around that placement. You'll either be running back and forth to where they are, or you will have to rework your entire base to incorporate them so they're actually convenient. Given how large the megastructures are, it can be difficult to get the Mega Printer platforms fairly close to one another, making it even more difficult to make good use of them after the megastructure is complete. So you were left deciding between leaving the thing where it is, unused, trying to somehow incorporate it into a base, or using a Mega Deconstructor to get rid of it. I feel like there should be a fourth option. Once all stages of a megastructure are complete, it would be great if the Mega Printer platform would remove its anchor and essentially decouple from its associated megastructure, allowing you to pick it up and move it to a different location. Perhaps the control panel could even be updated. Instead of just displaying that all stages are complete, it could have a new option that becomes available that allows you to collapse the platform back into the construction anchor, and then you could move that construction anchor to a location you wish to deploy the platform. Moving on, I feel that the distribution launch system is essentially useless. Sure, it looks really cool, and yeah, it and its component printer are required if you want to obtain construction anchors. But beyond that, it doesn't really do much. It has a data log that contains some snippets of information about the Viri research files, but that information doesn't really do much to tell a story. Like many other things in Megatech, even the Viri research file entries feel like they were rushed. But back to the DLS as a whole. If I'm building a megastructure on the very same planet, I should just be able to grab the construction anchor I need and carry it to the spot I want to deploy it. Requiring a specialized landing pad and then launching an anchor into space only to have it land a few feet away from the DLS just feels a bit silly. Once you have built all the megastructures you want, the DLS becomes truly useless. The tooltip for the DLS claims it stores power, though we once again have a glaring lack of attention to detail. In Astroneer, power production is measured in the number of units per second that is produced, and power storage is measured in the total number of units that can be stored and the units per second at which that stored power will be discharged. But the DLS claims to store 50 units per second. Regardless of the tooltip's inconsistent wording, the DLS doesn't really seem to be storing any power whatsoever. I tried disconnecting it from my power network and plugging in power consumers, yet nothing received power. So this is my first suggestion on how to improve the DLS. In addition to launching construction anchors, this thing should also be a huge battery. Let it store 16 times the power of a large battery, and let it be able to discharge that stored power at 125 units per second. Those values are based upon how power storage and discharge rate scale across the varying battery sizes we currently have. Having a built-in battery that can store that much power and discharge it at that rate would be incredibly useful. The second suggestion for the DLS would also help it feel a lot more useful. Slap a door on that thing somewhere and make it a new option for a shelter. This would make it incredibly useful for simultaneously getting a new base established while also opening up the figurative door to Megatech. And should you meet an untimely demise, it could be a respawn point. I think it could have even greater functionality if its built-in mega component printer was the only one that existed. I really don't see the need for the other megastructures to have these printers as well. If the DLS was the only structure with a component printer, that would give it additional utility throughout the duration of your megastructure building projects, giving it yet another reason to stick around. Speaking of the megastructure component printers, these are rough and need some work. First, they provide absolutely zero indication of how long a component is going to take to print. When you start printing something, the doors close and you hear what, to me, sounds like a pair of shoes tumbling in a clothes dryer 2 rooms away. And then you wait, with no clue how long it will take. These printers need some sort of indicator for the printing progress. I'm also not a fan of how the component printers obtain resources. For example, the construction anchor landing pad only needs 5 total resource nuggets. For all other printers, you can have those resources in your backpack, open the printer control panel, and begin printing with the printer pulling those resources from your backpack automatically. Not so with the component printer. Granted, the other components all require a far greater number of resources, so you wouldn't be able to carry them all in your backpack. But still, the component printer deviates from long-standing functionality present in Astroneer, and I feel this exemplifies a lack of attention to detail. Going hand in hand, utilizing medium resource canisters to provide resources does not follow long-established functionality. For all other production modules, you must first set a canister to output before it can provide resources to a module. The component printer just doesn't work like that. It, along with the drone printer of the Mega Printer platform, can just remove resources from the canisters. I suppose we could do some hand waving and dismiss this as new technology can do new things, and that would be fine. But I have always appreciated how all of the various modules in Astroneer have consistent functionality between them. To suddenly have something that functions differently just felt jarring and could, perhaps, even cause confusion for some players. That brings us to the Intermodal Terminal. The major problem here also applies to the tier size options on the rail stations. While this seems like a really great idea, its execution is very poor. If you are using shuttles or rail cars without storage, things will work just fine. but that is incredibly inefficient, especially considering how much fuel you will use to move only 8 items at a time in a shuttle without storage. Let's look at an example of just one of many problems with this one. I have the train portion of this terminal set to tier 1 items. When I try to load medium silos into the shuttle, they get moved back to the terminal because they aren't tier 1 items. But if I keep putting silos into the shuttle, the storage on the train portion of the terminal will fill up, and when I finally get a 4th silo into the shuttle, it takes off. Why? Because the slots in the shuttle are now occupied. It doesn't matter that those silos are empty, all the terminal sees is shuttle slots full, time to blast off. That is kinda frustrating. It is almost as though the shuttle terminal needs an option for tier sizes as well, so it knows what it should be paying attention to. I haven't really gone too deep in trying to come up with a solution for all of this yet, but it doesn't seem to really work in a very intuitive fashion. The problems get a bit worse though, and once again seem to highlight a lack of attention to detail. The rail stations can be set to load and unload tier 2 and 3 items, or just ignore tier sizes altogether. This too sounds really good in theory, but in practice, it is not implemented very well. I can send 2 large canisters of resources to a different planet via an automated shuttle. That other planet has a train with 2 rail cars ready to pick up those large canisters and move them to a rail station. But then what? I can only unload one of them onto a connected rail station. Since there is nothing in the game that can pick up and move a large canister out of the way so that the second one can be unloaded from the train, that means the train will just sit there partially unloaded. And maybe there is a way to use sensors to get the canister to unload its contents, but then how do you get the first canister back onto the train so the second one can be unloaded? And what about the shuttle? You would expect it to be waiting for the empty canisters to be returned so it can make a trip back to the originating planet to pick up more resources. But nope. It blasted off the moment the second canister was unloaded from the shuttle when it landed. None of this really works all that well. And if there are solutions to make all of this work, none of it is readily apparent to the average user. Call me crazy, but I do not think it should take a study in logic gates to come up with a system to make all of this just work. It seems the solution here isn't so simple. The entire underlying system of what gets loaded or unloaded when vehicles move, and what determines if a vehicle is full or empty, all of that needs to be completely redone. The Rails networks themselves were never straightforward to begin with, and now, with tier sizes and shuttles thrown into the mix, it's just a huge mess. As it stands, the Intermodal Terminal borders on being utterly useless to automate movement of items or resources from one planet to another. At best, it is an incredibly inefficient way to move 8 resources at a time. I really, truly hope the Intermodal Terminal and rail networks can enjoy the benefit of a complete overhaul that makes their operation much more intuitive and robust. Oh, and the built-in large fluid canisters need a way to be filled from other canisters somewhere on the terminal. As it stands, you either have to use an auto arm to fill them, or place small canisters yourself by hand, one by one. The Biodome has its own unique set of problems as well. The first is the most glaring and one I cannot quite comprehend. I'm talking about the inability to use the Biodome for any limited time event plant automation. This one almost feels intentional, like a limitation for limitation's sake to keep players engaged with limited time events longer or something. Whether it was intentional or not, it needs to be corrected. Many players, myself included, already have so much stuff on hand for limited time events that we wind up able to breeze through many of them in less than half an hour. If this was something intentional, trying to keep players more engaged with LTEs, then how about a refresh for those events more often? Project Cheer has never had a refresh, and all the others are coming up on their second year since they had any updates. give us new LTEs, or do yearly tweaks to the existing ones, but don't block the biodome for being used for plants that feed into completing a limited time event. Beyond that, the biodome has a lot of problems with its add-on components. The most obvious is the Mega Oxygenator, which is just too underpowered. When active, your oxygen consumption is decreased by about 50%, and that's it. Considering the cost of all of the resources necessary to build a biodome and the stages required to get a component printer, plus the cost of resources to create the Mega Oxygenator, and the case for this item even existing completely falls apart. It is far simpler to go befriend Stilgar and keep him well fed, or even invest the bytes and resources to get a portable oxygenator. And both of those essentially provide unlimited oxygen. My solution for this is to have the Mega Oxygenator remove the need for oxygen entirely for the planet upon which it is located. That would make it a truly worthwhile investment for the time and resources required. And that's just the first of a few problems with the biodome. The extensions are a nice idea, but they will ultimately result in a bunch of wilted plants. If you create all 5 extensions and then fill every available slot with a seed, I doubt you will be able to manually harvest them all before they wilt. Which brings us to another problem. The auto harvesters are nowhere near quick enough to keep up with a biodome that has all 5 extensions. Even if you fill 4 out of the 5 add-on slots with auto harvesters, they will quickly fall behind, and eventually everything in your biodome will most likely wind up wilted. The solution here seems simple. Give the auto harvesters a huge speed buff, allowing them to move around much faster to give them a fighting chance to get everything harvested in time. Or if that can't be done, then increase the amount of time before a plant wilts. Doing either of these, or both, would also allow us to take advantage of the storage add-on. As it is, a biodome with all the extra extensions needs 4 of its 5 slots filled with auto harvesters, leaving 1 remaining for the auto planter so you can actually get some automated seed production going. But if those harvesters were moving much more quickly, you wouldn't need as many of them, leaving space for not only the storage add-on, but also the auto fertilizer. Additionally, the way storage is prioritized needs a rework as well. I tried having 2 different plant types growing in my biodome at the same time. It had all 5 extension add-ons, an auto planter, and 4 auto harvesters. All 4 harvesters had empty large resource canisters, and the auto planter had around 2 dozen mega seeds that I wanted it to plant. I let the auto planter handle some of the planting with seeds that were in its canisters, while I planted another dozen or so mega seeds from a different plant. With just a handful of plants to begin with, the auto harvesters were able to get to them all in time, but the plants all dropped resources in addition to seeds. I tried numerous different combinations for storage, but the results were always the same. Most of my canisters had a single nugget of a resource in them, and few, if any, contained any harvested seeds. There needs to be some sort of prioritization rework that gives harvested seeds the highest priority to ensure that they make it back to the storage so they can be replanted by the auto planter. And from there, if a canister already contains a seed or resource, anything the harvesters pick up should go into existing canisters until those canisters are full before moving on to storing items in an empty canister. But beyond all of that, I question why the biodome is really needed at all. By time you are far enough along in a save to build it, you long ago gained the ability to create automated seed farms on a huge scale. If the biodome worked more reliably and without limitations on seed types, it could replace a lot of the moving parts in those seed farms. But it still feels like a solution in search of a problem, since it simply exchanges one method of massive seed farming for another. The Mega Oxygenator and Auto Fertilizer could both be the argument for a biodome over other methods if only the former were more effective and the latter could actually be used. But with how things are currently, the auto fertilizer means that your plants are going to wilt a lot quicker because they grow faster, making it even more unlikely that the harvesters will be able to keep up. The Biodome has so many good ideas that have been so very terribly implemented. The museum is not without fault either. Some of the rewards are really nice, though some of the milestone goals on the donation station need to be adjusted. The first milestones are fine where they are at 5,000. I like the rewards of an extra large wind turbine and a solar array for power donations, but the others just feel quite a bit out of step with something that's happening in late game. The museum is a late game item, so it should have nothing but late game rewards. For the second milestone, I feel this needs to be halved. I really love the collectible rewards you get from these, so there's no complaint there at all. But I think 50,000 would be a much more appropriate milestone for what you are actually getting. And that final milestone? 3 million? For resources, if you're dropping in nothing but nanocarbon alloy, which gives the highest value for all resources, you will still need 60 large resource canisters full to hit that 3 million mark. It's even worse for seeds. All regular seeds have a value of 30, with mega seeds having a value of 60. Assuming you are donating only mega seeds, you will need over 120 large resource canisters full of seeds to reach 3 million. Power and research are simply too high as well. I would suggest that the milestones be adjusted. 5,000 is fine for the first milestone. The second milestone can be 10 times higher at 50,000. And following that, the third milestone should be lowered all the way down to 500,000. That is still not an insignificant number of resources and seeds that will be required to hit that final milestone, but it is not simply absurd the way 3 million is. That would also bring each milestone more in line with the value of its respective reward. The third milestones grant you the following perks. Bytes increases your backpack power recharge speed. Power increases the amount of power your backpack can store. Resources increase your terrain tool speed, essentially. And seeds will allow your backpack to store more oxygen. We will come back to these milestones in a moment, but for now, I'll just say that none of these are particularly useful in the late game and do nothing to justify that massive 3 million milestone. The museum has some additional perks made possible through its add-ons, but there are problems here as well. First, the two display cases have the same name in the component printer, so you have to squint a bit at the tiny hologram to be able to determine which one you're actually printing. This should be easy enough to fix. Give one a name of small item display case and the other medium item display case to reflect the storage slots those display cases have. The display case platforms have a bit of an issue as well. I really like how they automatically form walkways between the museum and other display case platforms when placed in close proximity to one another. The problem is the placement of the platforms themselves. Well, maybe not the placement, but their lack of a locking function. I cannot count the number of times I was trying to pick up something in the display case attached to one of these platforms, only to have the cursor move just a few pixels as I clicked, and I was suddenly holding the entire platform up in the air instead of the item I was intending to pick up. If we could lock the platforms once we have placed them where we want them, that problem would be solved. Of course, that could present a new problem later on, since you also interact with the entire display case platform to activate perks. So I would propose solving this problem by moving the perk toggle to the display case instead of the display case platform. This would allow for a locking option to be implemented on the platform while still being able to toggle perks off and on via the display cases. There is one other problem with the display case platforms that you will discover if you try to rotate an item in its storage slot. There are only 2 angle options instead of the 4 that exist on every other storage slot in the game. I wanted to set up some lighting on a display case platform, but couldn't get the tall storage angled so that a light would point in the proper direction. I feel this is another glaring example of a lack of attention to detail, and it is something that needs to be corrected. The collections themselves are problematic as well. Most of them are fairly straightforward. The medium research item collection, however, is just a bit too much. First of all, the display case platform tooltip offers absolutely no useful information on which research items you need for the collection. That needs to be updated immediately. But the bigger problem is that at least 2 of the mineral research items are not guaranteed to appear in every save, making that collection quite literally impossible for some players. Specifically, the mineral research items from Calidor and Visanya seem to have fairly low spawn rates, with some players also reporting that they are unable to find the mineral research item on Novus. The spawn rates for these need to be significantly increased, and done so in a way that applies to existing saves. The perks you get for the various displayed collections aren't bad on the whole, but none are really game-changing by the time you are able to activate them. But we'll come back to these in a moment. Going hand in hand with the museum, I still haven't really figured out what the walkway bundles are for. I also don't understand why we don't have tall walkway posts in addition to the shorter ones. I get that they form walkways and will remove terrain blocking their path, but do these really serve any useful purpose? I do like how the walkways are formed between the museum and display case platforms, though with an increased movement speed perk, I find I often wind up walking right off the walkways because they're too narrow. I hope we see additional base building items in future updates that can incorporate the walkways, because right now they aren't all that useful outside of adding a slightly different aesthetic to your base. While we're on a tangent, I have to talk about the icon signs. Overall, these are fine, though they could definitely use a greater selection of icons. In addition to the options we already have, I feel that each resource icon, or at least the natural resources, should have been available. The directional arrows work fine, but only from one side. See this icon sign that I placed down here in the mantle to point to the direction of my ramp back to the surface? From this side, it would seem that I need to head right, but from this side, it is pointing left. The arrows need to be reversed on one side so they're always pointing in the proper direction, otherwise they're only helpful from one side. Additionally, I think these should appear on the compass with their nav points displaying the icon we chose on the sign. As it is, they are only really useful when in your line of sight. Moving back to the megastructures, we end with the orbital platform. I guess if you're really into building a base in space, this thing is pretty cool. Beyond that, I really fail to see much of a point to it. Aside from occasionally needing to flatten an area to expand a base, I rarely need any soil in the late game. The only thing I regularly turned to a soil centrifuge for in the late game was organic, but Tappers eliminated that late game need for organic from the soil centrifuge, leaving me with zero need for unlimited soil. If the orbital platform had a way to automate soil extraction and could fill 4 to 6 of the new large soil canisters on its own, that has the potential to be useful. But as it stands, I still need to take the time to slowly gather all of that soil myself using either my terrain tool or a rover with a drill. And that is just too time consuming to be worth the effort in my opinion. Maybe an automated extraction system could incorporate a rail line that rings the inner portion of the orbital platform with a new specialized rail car that includes a version of the crane that's in the game. We could then attach a drill from a rover along with a soil canister, then interact with this new rail car so it could start circling around the orbital platform, gathering soil. The crane arm could extend further and further until the mini asteroid in the center is completely consumed or the soil canister is full. I also feel that the third stage of the orbital platform is equally useless. Sure, you can fly very, very slowly. If the flight speed matched movement speed when on a hoverboard, then sure, it would be a nice thing to have. But given how slow you fly around, it feels like more of a hindrance than a benefit. The terrain platform add-ons for the Orbital Platform are a nice idea, but they are limited in both terms of how many you can have and what you can build on them. You can only have 8 of them with 4 on each side. They are fairly large, so that does open up quite a bit of space, but you cannot build any of the megastructures on them. You can only build the megastructures on the main portion of the Orbital Platform itself. That limitation definitely hinders the terrain platform's usefulness. Beyond the megastructures that were included in Megatech, I was quite surprised by some that I felt were missing. I'm referring to the parkade pads, installed platforms, and wrecked spaceports that appear in somewhat random locations in every save. The wrecked spaceport has been around forever, with the parkade pads and installed platforms arriving more recently. The scale of each of these items definitely puts them into the category of Megastructure, and I really expected we would see these reworked with Megatech. If you want to use them as they currently exist, you are either going to need to move your base to their location, or you are going to be building an entirely new base. Worse, it is very rare to have all 3 of these structures in close enough proximity to one another to incorporate all 3 into a base. I truly feel that we either need to be able to construct these items where we see fit, or they should be something we can package and transfer to a new location so they can be better incorporated into a base build out. So that is all of the various problems of each of the megastructures individually, but there is still something remaining that I feel is the biggest overall problem with Megatech. Nothing in Megatech really does much to enhance the late game. Let's be honest with ourselves here. Large-scale automation in Astroneer has always felt like something that was awkwardly tacked on, and not something that was ever intended to be a core feature of the game. Before Megatech, by time you could reach truly industrial-scale automation, you had no reason to do so beyond your own sense of accomplishment. Leading up to its launch, Megatech seemed like maybe it would finally give such huge automation projects a reason to exist, but failed to deliver that realization. Each project will consume a lot of resources, but they are not balanced in a way that requires a large number of every resource. There are only a handful of resources you really need in massive quantities that large-scale automation can provide. But once you have everything from Megatech built, you're pretty much back to where you started. Massive automation production lines no longer have a clear reason to exist, and the megastructures themselves do very little to enhance anything in the late game. So, how do we resolve this problem? For years now, I felt Astroneer could really benefit from a Game Plus mode. If you're not familiar, a Game Plus mode essentially allows you to play a game all the way through to completion, and then, when you start a new game, carry some of your progress from your first playthrough into the new one. This is where I think Megatech could be truly beneficial. Imagine this. Once you have unlocked all of the various perks within Megatech, there would be an option in the game settings to enable Megatech perks. If you toggle it on and begin a new game, that game would carry all of those perks, and they would be available the moment you make landfall. Suddenly, perks that are only marginally useful in the late game would revolutionize the early hours of a new save. I don't know about you, but I often get ideas of new bases or other projects that I would like to take on in Astroneer. But whether due to an older save being bogged down with years of digging, or established bases and automation that would take far too long to dismantle and rebuild, I often skip them. These ambitious projects would be much better suited for a new save, but I really don't want to endure everything from the early portion of a new save just to reach the stage where I can begin my projects. But a Game Plus mode with perks carried over from Megatech would make getting through those early stages much simpler, allowing me to start a new ambitious project much sooner. and that means I would play Astroneer a lot more than I do today. For players who do not want the Megatech perks in a new save, the option could be available to toggle off before beginning the new save. To make it even better, it could be something that has to be enabled or disabled before a new save begins, and once that save is underway, cannot be changed. Maybe this could just be integrated into custom game modes, with that toggle for Megatech perks existing as an option in a custom configuration. This would only build upon the idea of a Game Plus mode, as those typically not only provide added perks for a new game, but also a greater challenge. Those seeking a faithful Game Plus representation could then go on to increase the number of hazardous plants or introduce the permadeath condition already available in custom games. For those simply wanting to build something ambitious with the aid of the perks from Megatech, we would have that option. So, I have identified what I feel are the problems with Megatech and some possible solutions to resolve those problems. This is the point in the video where I remind everyone, myself included, that I am not a game developer. I have absolutely no idea whether any of my proposed solutions would be trivial changes or if they would require a huge effort to implement. If it is the latter, I have no idea if System Era would find value in investing the necessary resources to achieve those solutions. What I do know is that System Era will see this video and they will see your comments, so it's your turn. Aside from known technical issues such as bugs, crashes, or other weird glitchy things, what problems have you found with Megatech? And what sort of solutions do you think would work to resolve those problems? Head down to the comments and let's talk about it. You probably won't see a reply from System Era, but I can promise you they will see them. Even if it means I need to compile your comments into a big long list and send them to System Era myself. Just remember to keep your comments constructive. Name calling or personal attacks are never okay. I have loved Astroneer from the moment I first played, and despite the disappointment of both Glitchwalkers and Megatech, I still adore this cute little space person game. I want to see it continue on as a success that delights and inspires a countless number of players. And it is my love for the game that I've made this video today. I also know that System Era is full of hardworking, incredibly talented people who share my passion for Astroneer, and I have full faith in their ability to correct the course that Astroneer has been on for the past year. I do hope that within the next few months, Megatech will have gone from something rightfully deserving of its mostly negative rating on Steam to something that is rated as overwhelmingly positive. And with that, until next time, I'm Brandon, reminding you to stay vainglorious.